Hello and welcome back. Start out by telling you a relatively embarrassing story about myself. When I first started at the Houston Texans, I had weight trained my whole entire life. And I was working with a strength coach, and I said, yeah, I know how to lift weights. I know how to do that. And he started training me, and I describe it as a religious experience because the workouts were hard and intense. But one of the fortunate things that I did was I took a look at what my body composition was before I started weight training. And in my 8 years at the Texans, I've gained a documented 7 pounds of muscle mass by resistance training. And I will tell you, at my age, that's probably one of the most beneficial things that I could do is to add as much functional lean mass as possible. So the point of this is that being healthy is not just a matter of what you eat. It's also a matter of, are you physically active throughout the day? This is so important as a public health campaign that it's now part of the food guide pyramid. So if you look at the food guide pyramid, you can watch a little man climbing up the stairs. It's trying to demonstrate the relationship, that the marriage of physical activity and good nutrition as part of an overall wellness plan. Many diseases and detrimental health conditions are related to being inactive. They also can be prevented through routine physical activity and exercise. And this lecture will discuss the basic components of an exercise program. This has become so important to promote physical activity among Americans that the American College of Sports Medicine has as a campaign, Exercise is Medicine. They really want Americans to embrace the concept that sometimes it's lifestyle, nutrition and physical activity that's going to ward off chronic illness. It may not be another pharmaceutical. So this lecture is also going to take a look at how can an average person implement physical activity into their daily lifestyle. I'm going to caution you here, however, if you have a pre-existing health condition, for example, if you have diabetes, you really want to make sure that you clear this with your primary physician before you implement an exercise program. But let's take a look or explore some of the benefits of exercise. Physical health benefits. It reduces the risk of certain diseases and disorders, such as heart disease. Studies show that being fit or active was associated with reducing the risk of cardiovascular-related diseases by 50%. Now think of what that means. I'm also going to suggest to you here that sometimes the benefits of disease prevention are the best in people who go from doing nothing to doing something. So if you say, well, I've not exercised, I'm relatively sedentary, I don't really like physical activity, some is always going to be better than none, and it's that initial startup where you get a significant benefit from starting a physical activity program. Exercise can also reduce the risk of hypertension and stroke. What about cancer? Well, one study showed that people who are physically active, men and women, can reduce the risk of colon cancer by 30 to 40%. So again, as we talk about cancer as being a feared diagnosis, wouldn't it be wonderful to include physical activity as part of your wellness portfolio? What about breast cancer? The same study revealed that compared to inactive counterparts, there is a 20 to 30% reduction in relative risk of breast cancer. So again, we know that heart disease and cancer are two major killers of Americans, and now we can link being physically active to the prevention of those diseases. What about bone disease, osteoporosis? Well, what exercise can do is it helps to build bone mass, and the older you get, it can help to prevent falls and reduce the risk of hip fractures, and it can prevent the bone loss associated with aging. So it almost sounds like it's too good to be true. And in this case, it's not. Physical activity is that good. It can also help to reduce your risk of obesity or control obesity, particularly that excessive abdominal fat that is linked, again, with many, many chronic diseases. And diabetes. One lifestyle intervention study found that a minimum of 150 minutes per week, not per day, of exercise was more effective in reducing diabetes than metformin alone. So what does that mean? It means that lifestyle matters in the prevention of chronic illness as well as the treatment of chronic illness. Beyond the physical, there are psychological health benefits. It increases your feeling of well-being. Studies suggest it decreases depression and anxiety. It can help to relieve stress. And a better body image improves self-esteem and motivational levels. So we've got this wonderful solution to, again, chronic illness. Exercise helps to control long-term weight. An energy deficit of 500 to 1,000 calories per day is necessary to achieve a healthy 1 to 2 pound weight loss per week. And that energy deficit is best achieved through a well-balanced diet, making some changes that you can live with. And I will always tell my clients, make the dietary changes that are going to become permanent and increase your physical activity. Consider that when you introduce physical activity, you have a better guarantee that what you're losing is body fat loss, not just weight loss. When the body needs more energy calories to maintain muscle, so the more muscle mass you have, the higher your calorie needs. So I always am relatively excited that my measured metabolic rate went from 1,200 calories when I started at the Texans to 1,600 calories per day by adding that 7 pounds of lean mass. So keep in mind that as you build muscle, the more muscle mass you have, the bigger your metabolic engine and the higher your calorie needs at rest. So again, this helps to burn more calories at rest than the average person would. So if our authoritative organization here is the American College of Sports Medicine, what do the experts say? ACSM recommends the following. For 5 days a week, do moderately intensive cardio for a half an hour a day. And what is cardiovascular exercise? It's walking, it's gardening, it's not necessarily going to a gym. You can certainly do a lot of cardio activity outside. Or 3 days a week, do vigorously intense cardio for 20 minutes a day. And their newest recommendation is 2 days a week, do 8 to 10 strength training exercises with 8 to 12 repetitions of each exercise. I actually have a wonderful picture of my daughter's college, and you look at the cardiovascular equipment, and all the women are on the treadmill and the elliptical, and all the men are doing weight training. And what we need to do is have them cross the great divide and have women strength training and maybe men doing a little bit more work on the elliptical. Now, by moderate intense physical activity, we mean working hard enough to start perspiring and increase your heart rate. By vigorous exercise, we mean that if you're running with a friend, if it's vigorous, little conversation could be exchanged. A few words, sometimes that's referred to as the talk test. The recommendation for a half an hour, 5 days per week is for the average healthy adult to maintain general good health and reduce the risk for the chronic diseases that we mentioned. However, if weight loss is your goal, if you're trying to lose weight or you've lost weight and you want to maintain your weight loss, it may be necessary to do an hour to an hour and a half of physical activity a day, 5 days per week. So one of the challenges is as we become more sedentary as a culture, as we have more things that are convenient. Think about, I remember my mother washing her clothes down in the basement with a hand washing machine and then walking outside and hanging it up on a clothesline. We have too many conveniences in our modern day society and we get less and less exercise. So ACSM has addressed this by almost giving you an exercise prescription. Well, what are the components of exercise? Let's talk about physical fitness and let's define it. The ACSM definition is a state of health measured by strength, endurance, and flexibility. They don't define physical fitness as huge muscles, being ripped, a tiny waistline, or anyone like a bodybuilder with a large amount of muscle mass. What is strength? It's the level of maximum force that the muscles can produce. So I'm going to have you think about that for a second. It's the level of maximum force. So if you're one of these folks that's going to the gym and you're lifting really, really light weights, that's probably not strength-producing exercise. Endurance, it's the length of time muscles can perform activities. Flexibility, range of motion, all of those are important. Well, what about muscular strength? Weight-bearing or resistance exercise is important in order to build muscles and tone muscle fibers. Unfortunately, as I've mentioned, our current lifestyle doesn't require lifting. Now, I want you to consider what's known as the overload principle. In order to get stronger, you have to ask the muscle to do more work than it can. Overloading the muscle allows it to adapt. So what does that actually mean? I'll give you a quick example. If you're going to do, let's say, a bicep exercise where you're raising and lowering the weight, if your muscle is capable of lifting 10 pounds and that's all you ever do, you're not going to get any stronger. You're not going to build strength. Your muscle adapts to that overload. It's now conditioned to that overload, and it technically isn't overload anymore because the muscle is already accustomed to that. The frequency of strength training should be about 2 times per week, both upper and lower body. So keep in mind that what you're trying to do is have equal strength. And I'm also going to say on both sides of the body, because oftentimes what we do is when we strength train, we train the muscles we can see because we're looking in the mirror. We train the muscles we can see and we forget about our backside. As you become more conditioned or more trained, the number of days of training can increase. Now keep in mind, injuries can happen in the weight room, and some sources say the most frequent injury site is the lower back. So consider hiring a trained individual to help to develop a program for you and meet with you on an ongoing basis. A really good strength and conditioning professional can modify a program for you based on your individual needs. And again, a good place to look for that person is at acsm.org. Okay, let's talk about some general concepts. Let's talk about the type of resistance training. The types of resistance training can vary, and first is calisthenics. It's using your own body weight in general without using any equipment. So this would include push-ups, pull-ups, crunches, squats, lunges, and so forth. But let's say, for example, I'm someone who loves doing crunches, and every morning I get up and I do 25 crunches. Once my muscle adapts to 25 crunches, I've got to do one or two things. I've got to find a way to add weight, and maybe what you do is take, let's say a couple cans of pork and beans, cross them across your chest when you do your squat, because what you want to do is add some additional weight to that squat or that crunch to make sure that you're going to get adequate amounts of overload. There's also something called fixed or constant resistance, exercise that provide a constant amount of resistance through a full range of motion. The most common examples here include the use of free weights, also resistance bands and certain machines. So I have a lot of clients who travel with their resistance bands because they can't honestly bring barbells or dumbbells in their suitcase. Variable resistance. These are exercises where the amount of resistance changes through the full range of motion. Some of these are machines that alter the resistance. You might not know it, but the machine is altering the resistance for you. So when you're weaker, it may back off the weight. When you're stronger, it's going to actually add some additional weight for you. So what about your resistance training plan? How do you put that together? You want to raise the weight in a deliberate and smooth manner. So I'm going to suggest to you, you do not use momentum. So if you've ever been in a weight room, you see individuals take the weight and they swing their hips to get the weight up. You've now incorporated momentum into that lift, and it's not as effective. You've reduced the amount of weight that you're lifting because you've incorporated momentum. So raise the weight in a deliberate and smooth manner. For a moment, when you get the weight up to its fully contracted position, pause. At this point, the muscle fibers are fully contracted. You've got every muscle fiber engaged, and that's a really good thing in terms of helping you to add some strength. Slowly shift from the raising to the lowering of the weight. And if I could tell you one major tip, really emphasize the lowering of the weight. Half of the benefits come from raising the weight. The other half of the benefit comes from lowering the weight. Take more time to lower the weight. Now I want you to think about this. When you're raising the weight, you're going against gravity. When you're lowering the weight, you have gravity working in your favor. So one of the ways, and truly, you want to make the exercise harder. One of the ways you can make the exercise harder is to take more time. So I actually count. I'll count 5 seconds up, pause in the contracted position, and then I'll count out loud to a count of 8 and lower the weight through a count of 8. I will tell you this makes the resistance training exercise much more difficult to do. Most of the muscular damage is done in this phase, and you might be asking yourself, I don't want to damage my muscles. But actually what you're trying to do is cause small little micro tears in that muscle, and the muscle's going to go, I'm going to have to adapt, I'm going to have to get stronger, I'm going to have to strengthen those muscle fibers, i.e. toning, I'm going to have to strengthen those muscle fibers, or I'm going to have to add more muscle fibers, and that's exactly what resistance training is designed to do. You also want to go through the full range of motion, not these little half raises that you see people do in the gym. Full range of motion, okay? To strengthen your muscles, you must include activities that make your muscles work against a gradually increasing resistance. And again, I cannot stress the overload principle and how important it is. Keep in mind, it can be achieved by doing the following. Once you're accustomed to it, you increase the resistance. Use a heavier weight. I always say I want to lift the most amount of weight as safely as I can every time I go to the weight room. If that's not a possibility for you, you can increase overload by increasing the number of repetitions of exercises. Again, the number of raising and lowering motions, such as a bicep curl. You can also increase the number of sets that you perform. And a set is a group of repetitions. Again, so instead of doing 2 sets of 8, you might do 2 sets of 10 or maybe 3 sets of 10 and gradually increase that. Increasing the intensity, more work in the same amount of time. Okay, so what you're really trying to do is get those muscles to work hard. Specificity is another training principle. Exercising a certain muscle or muscle group targets and develops that part. For an overall positive effect, we need to strengthen all major muscle groups. The bad news is if you stop training, we see evidence of the reversibility or the detraining principle. Within a few weeks of stopping training, you lose some of the strength that you built up. So again, when you're designing your exercise program, you think, American College of Sports Medicine is telling me that I need to do this at least twice a week. That means 52 weeks out of the year. It's not an occasional thing. It's not maybe I'll do this once a month. This is something that you have to build into your exercise program. Muscles can atrophy without use, and that's what generally happens to people when they age. Okay, how much strength training is necessary? We'll use the FIT principle. And what does the FIT principle mean? It means frequency. How often do you exercise? Again, in accordance with the ACSM guidelines, at least 2 days a week, 8 to 10 strength training exercises that train each muscle group. So again, you might do biceps, triceps, quads, the front of your leg, the hamstrings, the back of your legs. Plan for at least 1 to 2 days of rest in between, because again, what you're trying to do is make the muscle work really hard, cause some microfibril tears, and then you allow the muscles to heal, and then you go back again. The second part of the FIT principle is intensity. How hard do you exercise? The training session should be challenging to you. If you're training with a partner who's been training for a while, what's challenging to them and you might be something completely different. And I think oftentimes when people get exercise religion, what they do is they go into a weight room, they lift too much weight, they're not capable of doing it, and then the next day they're so sore that they don't want to go back and do that. But you need to have enough intensity that by the time you're done with your last repetition, your muscle should feel fatigued. I always describe it as I really couldn't do one more. I'm to the point where my muscle is tired enough, I can't do one more. T in the FIT principle is time. How long do you exercise? For strength training, this is measured as the number of sets or reps that you do, although the intensity and your form are always important. Give yourself some rest period in between sets to rest. 30 to 90 seconds is typical. The other part of the FIT principle, the other T, is what type of exercises you do. Exercises you do should target every major muscle group. I will tell you in professional football, most of the major injuries that football players sustain are going to be to their neck and their traps, their upper shoulder muscles. And the challenge is our football players must train their neck because they're trying to protect themselves against a catastrophic injury. So keep in mind we're talking about all muscle groups. Again, you have to remember to work opposing muscle groups, the front and the back, biceps and triceps, quads in the hamstrings in the back and the quads in the front. You can try this FIT principle for other forms of exercise besides strength training as well. You can use the FIT principle for endurance. Endurance exercise or aerobic exercise is defined as the ability to deliver oxygen to muscles and the capability of muscles to use oxygen for physical activity. Aerobic means with oxygen. Aerobic also means performing activities that increase the heart rate for a longer period of time. Some of these activities would include jogging, playing basketball, soccer, swimming, low to moderate intensity activities that can be sustained for a long period of time. What do the benefits include for aerobic or endurance exercise? Reduced body fat and improvement in weight control, reducing blood pressure, decreasing total cholesterol, improvement in heart and lung function, lowered resting heart rate. Remember, if your heart's beating harder on a regular basis, you may be overworking it. And so again, if I lower my resting heart rate, I can actually get some real beneficial health effects from that. Aerobic or endurance exercise also improves glucose tolerance. So again, if you're that person sitting on the fence of prediabetes, remember, exercise is medicine in this case, and what you're really trying to do is prevent diabetes from becoming full-blown. It reduces insulin resistance. Well, how do I know if I'm training aerobically? How do I know if I'm getting all those benefits? Well, one of the things that you can do is check your pulse rate. So here's what you do. You measure your pulse rate immediately after you're done exercising. Place your fingertip, not your thumb, on your carotid or neck artery and count the number of pulses you feel in a 10-second period. Multiply this by 6 to determine your heart rate. And what should your heart rate be? Maximum heart rate is to be predicted by, and this is a prediction equation, so not universally true. There are some medications that can alter this, and this is why you always want to check with your physician. Maximum heart rate is predicted to be 220 minus your age. So if I'm 50 years old, my maximum heart rate is 220 minus 50, which is 170 beats per minute. Beginners should strive for between 40 to 60% of their maximum heart rate and work up to a higher level. So if our 50-year-old is a beginner, his heart rate should be up to 170 beats per minute times 0.6. Heart rate maximum for that individual to train aerobically would be 102 beats per minute. Aerobically fit people, so if you've already been running and jogging, if you're already fit, they should aim for 70 to 85% of their maximum heart rate levels. So our 50-year-old, in order to be in the aerobic training zone, his target heart rate would be between 119 and 144 beats per minute. Aim for a minimum of 3 days a week of aerobic exercise with no more than 2 days off between sessions. So keep in mind what we're trying to do is make sure that the heart is working hard enough. You're going to get all the aerobic benefits from that increase in heart rate, but also keep in mind certain medications are going to make this not an accurate assessment. For example, if you take a beta blocker for heart disease, the bottom line is you're not going to fall into that zone, so you're going to have to ask your physician or cardiologist for a modification for you as an individual. So we've got aerobic. What about anaerobic? Anaerobic means without oxygen. This is short-lasting, high-intensity exercise, and this includes very heavy weightlifting, sprinting. Sprinters, you can always tell sprinters because, again, they're going to cover a lot of distance in a very short period of time, so they may run that 100 in a very short period of time. That is an anaerobic event. Jumping rope, interval training, and isometrics. Well, what are the benefits of these anaerobic exercises? It's the development of stronger muscles and oftentimes bigger muscles. So one of the things that happens in my practice is I deal with a lot of female sprinters. And because they sprint, because they're exercising without oxygen, they're an anaerobic athlete, the body adapts by making more muscle mass. So my sprinters will look and say, how did I end up with such large legs and a large behind? The body is adapting to the demand that you've placed on it. So it's a great example of the overload principle. You're asking the muscles to do more, i.e. sprint, and the only way it can do that is adapt by increasing the muscle mass. And again, it makes you leaner and stronger, which adds in weight management, and muscles use more calories than fat. Well, for beginners who are not very fit, try interval training as a way to incorporate anaerobic exercise. For example, increase your running pace for a short period of time. So you might be running on the treadmill and you're kind of jogging, maybe 5 miles per hour, and then for 10 to 60 seconds you ramp up the speed, and then you bring it back down. You have a slower recovery period. So that might be a way of you increasing your ability to tolerate sprinting activities. Well, also part of this exercise plan must be flexibility. Flexibility means stretching muscle groups, and it increases range of motion in joints and muscles. It helps to protect our muscles and tissues from injuries or tears. Stretching after exercise can help keep the muscles in their maximum range of motion. Now, you notice that I said after exercise. Stretching is not a warm-up. You do not take a cold muscle. You do not take a cold muscle to its maximum stretching point. You want to be warmed up. So stretching should not be used as a warm-up. Now, say for example, you're going to go out and jog a little bit, maybe run around the parking lot 1 or 2 times, get your heart rate up, start to break a sweat, and then if you want to stretch before you go on your long run, perfectly okay, but stretching is not a warm-up. Now, what about hydration as part of this whole exercise plan? Dehydration can impair exercise performance and it can become life-threatening. Water deficits in excess of 2 to 3% of body weight can decrease exercise performance. Remember from our hydration lecture, for each pound you lose in physical activity, you've lost 16 ounces of sweat that you did not replace. In order to regain the fluid that you lost, you're going to need to replenish it with up to 16 to 24 ounces of extra fluid. So one of the challenges is I need you to weigh. Weighing before and after exercise is not going to assess how much body fat you lost. Keep in mind, in order to lose a pound of body fat, you have to lose 3,500 calories. Chances are in your exercise you didn't go run 35 miles. So the bottom line is that when you lose weight during exercise, it is always fluid weight. Nutrition components. What should you eat before exercise? Well, low to moderate intensity exercise does not require extra food. And the problem that I see is people think, okay, I'm exercising, I need to eat more. And what they actually do is they out-eat their exercise. So they might have walked 3 miles, burned about 300 calories, and then went out and ate a Big Mac, 600 calories, and lo and behold, they out-ate their exercise. But if you need something before exercise, a meal or a snack should provide you enough fluid to stay hydrated. It should also be low in fat and fiber to minimize stomach problems. Yes, I did say low in fiber, and dietitians do say things like low in fiber. So your gut may not be able to tolerate extra fiber if you're going to go run or work out intensely. It should be, again, particularly if you're training aerobically, it should be relatively high in carbohydrates to maintain blood sugar levels. And it should be moderate in protein. But the key point is it has to be well tolerated by you. We're all a little bit different, so what might work for me might be a disaster for you. What about during exercise? Well, during exercise, what you're really trying to do is replace the fluid losses and provide enough carbohydrate, particularly if you're doing an endurance workout. Think about if you're doing exercise for more than an hour, you're kind of running low on the carbohydrate tank and you may need to have a source of carbohydrate. This would be a great time to have a sports drink. Also, you might want to consider levels of hydration and a need for calories in extremes of temperature, high heat or very low or high altitude. What about after exercise? Most important thing is take in adequate fluids and energy, anything that's going to have calories and carbohydrate, to replace your storage carbohydrate, the carbohydrate that you had in the bank, called your muscle glycogen stores. So I think the challenge is a lot of it depends on how much time you're spending exercising. So again, if I go walk around my neighborhood, I do not need to eat before I exercise. I might want to have water during exercise, and I don't need to add more food after. So again, I think the key thing is the intensity of the exercise. Remember that FIT principle. Now, if I'm exercising intently, I really want to try and consume a small meal within about 30 minutes of physical activity to promote what's called nutritional recovery. So some suggestions for food intake when you're on an exercise program. Well, this is, again, separate from the exercise experience. This is just part of your training diet. Increase the intake of whole grains, cereals, and legumes. Get 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables a day. Keep in mind these fruits and vegetables provide vitamins, minerals, fiber, and fruits and vegetables, depending on the one, are between 80 and 90% water. So I describe it as the water that you chew. And consume adequate amounts of water throughout the day. Now, personalizing that exercise plan. It's important to develop a plan that feels right and will last for you. Change up different activities if you get bored throughout the week, and that might be a strategy. For me personally, I love doing the same thing all the time because what it does is I push myself a little bit harder and I can monitor change over time. I can monitor my progress by doing something that's similar. Try resistance training every other day and doing aerobic or anaerobic activities on the other days. Maybe what you want to do is establish a walking or a running group with neighbors or coworkers. I usually recommend if you're going to do that, try and pick people that are about the same level of fitness you are. So if you're just a beginner, you don't want to go out and do a walking program with someone who competes in walking races. Also remember that what we're trying to do is make this enjoyable. So try gardening, dancing, biking, taking the stairs at work if that's something that you can do. Ways to increase motivation to adhere to an exercise program are a couple. One, get a pedometer. A pedometer can be used to track steps that you take every day and strive for at least 10,000 per day. But if you've not done this, don't start at 10,000. Maybe you start a little bit lower at about 2,000 steps per day and work your way up. Well, do pedometers work? Research has been shown to study that how effective pedometers are. The results are improved motivation readiness to exercise, confidence for exercising. They will say that as you count your steps, you may oftentimes look at ways of adding more steps to your day. And certainly there are pedometers out there that actually can help you to count your calories as well. Again, reductions in body weight, percent body fat, and waist circumference have also been shown with pedometer use. And get a partner to exercise with you if you need to be held accountable. So keep in mind, you want to pick an activity that you like, not an activity that maybe your husband or wife likes. If you don't like that, the chances are you're not going to do that. So again, I think the key thing is, whatever you do, pick out something that you like and be consistent. Your body needs regular exposure to physical exercise. Exercise is medicine. You wouldn't stop taking your medicine, take a couple days off, go back on. I want you to think exercise is medicine. I need my daily dose. Now, what about some frequently asked questions? Do I have to do my half hour or hour of exercise all at one time? And the science says no, you don't. Can I split it up? Absolutely. If it makes it more convenient. So say, for example, you've only got maybe 10 minutes to devote at lunch. 10 minutes is part of that 30 that you might need to get for the day. And so maybe that 10 minutes at lunch can help to make your exercise plan more sustainable. Another frequently asked question is, should I exercise when I'm sick? And the answer is no. You really need to take time off because if you're spending extra calories and energy for exercise, keep in mind that when you're ill, particularly when you have a fever, you have an increase in your metabolic rate and your body needs those calories for white blood cells, for the stress response, and the bottom line is take a couple days off. Once you have an established exercise program, you know you're going to go back to it, but take some time off when you're sick. Also be respectful. Don't go to a gym when you're ill because you've now exposed others in the gym as well. So thank you very much.